So we all age. This is a fact. We know this to be true. And as we age and move through our lives, there are social constructs that determine expectations about what we do and when we do it. Take retirement, for example. You know, the expectation is that we will retire and live the dream. But in reality, retirement isn't a dream for a lot of people. In fact, it isn't necessarily what they want to do. People are seeking alternatives. And so this notion of retirement is an interesting one, because I think we should question these social constructs and wonder, are they still actually relevant, and where do they come from? So retirement was actually invented, and it's actually quite a young thing in our human evolution. It was invented in the 1880s by Chancellor Otto von Bismarck in Germany. Fearing a rebellion amongst the working classes who were looking for socialist reform, he introduced a pension and retirement plan that we've now adopted as the way things are done the world over, at least in Western society. We don't actually question this construct of retirement, which actually sets an age for old age and for redundancy. We do talk about the age of retirement. Just recently in Australia, we've been talking about it should be 70 because of productivity and skill shortage. But what about the actual construct itself? We don't actually question that. I want to introduce you to my Uncle Pete. He was someone who didn't necessarily question the social constructs around him, but he did what he did. He just lived his life. He was the kind of man that would fill a room, not just because he was very tall and at times very loud, especially when he was telling a story that we'd all be listening to him because we knew the punchline was going to be brilliant. But he was the kind of man that in his very presence made people feel good because he took time to listen to their stories. He was my mentor. And I would always go to him with my questions. If I was worried about, my degree or the choices that I had to make, I would go and sit with him, and we'd sit in front of the fire, and we'd sit for hours, and we'd drink lots of wine, and he would talk. He would listen to me. And he actually never gave me necessarily the right advice, but he asked the right questions that made me help me find my way. I want to tell you about a conversation I had with him a couple of years ago. I was living in Australia, and he was in Holland. All my Dutch side of the family is in Holland. And so I was on the phone with him and my auntie, and I was really curious to hear what they were up to because we hadn't spoken for a while. And he said, well, Inge, I have got some great news. You're going to love this. I started a business. And I was like, what do you mean you started a business? I laughed. I was like, what do you mean? You're 75. My social construct. And he said, yeah, I've started a business. It's called grijs goud. Grijs goud means gray gold. And he said, the reason why I started it is because I myself, even though I love spending time with Adi and the kids and the grandchildren, and I have a great social life and wonderful community, I actually feel unfulfilled. And there's so many other people around me that feel unfulfilled. So I've created a business in which I'm actually recruiting older people and placing them in temporary employment or project-based employment because all these people have skills and knowledge that's just going to waste. My vision is that I create an alternative where people can also enjoy those aspects of retirement, which is largely, family and enjoying those wonderful things, but also work. I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And so I wanted to know more. And I knew at the time that Australia's population is aging. I knew this, but I didn't really understand what it meant. For me, it was a statistical kind of a mathematical demographic thing. Until I started researching it a little bit more. And so Australia's population is aging. So if you think about it, the figures are showing that in 2050, the quarter of our whole population was going to be in this retired state. That concerns me, particularly when we think about retirement being as something like, okay, you're done now, so okay, shelf life's up, okay, off you go over this side. We're also living longer, so life expectancy currently for women is 84, for men it's 80, and in 2050 we expect that to be in the early 90s. So we're going to be living longer in this retired state if we still think about it in the same way. So we might be retired for 30 or 40 years. It's a long time. And so I expect that we're going to see more and more people like Pete and his peers who are feeling unfulfilled. From an economic perspective, I think it's also worth noting that there are implications of retirement and also this aging population, because as we're getting older, actually the working age population, which we now know to be the 15 to 64-year-olds, that age group is actually not growing. So in the 1970s, there were 7.5 people paying tax to make sure that we have the appropriate age and healthcare services that our older members of society need. Now, it's about 5, and in 2050, it'll be 2.5. So I'm kind of going, oh, that doesn't look really sustainable either. And it needn't be. Well, it's an unnecessary trend, put it that way. Because in 2009, there were 2 million older Australians above the age of 55 looking for work, and that's been valued at $10 billion. Now, if only a proportion of this group were to work and have their contributions be channeled in a meaningful way, imagine what that could create. But unfortunately, 1 out of 5 people above the age of 55 are told they're too old, they're too expensive, or they're too hard to train. Then there's the health effects. Very recent research from the UK, from the Institute of Economics, has showed that there is a link between being retired and mental and physical and self-assessed health. So, I kind of go, wow, as a society, there's an imperative to disrupt this thing, to reframe retirement. Think about all the wise people you know. I know a few wise people. There's Pete and there's a few others, and I've met some wise people here today also, this morning. But think about the questions you would like to ask them. Think about the things that they can teach us from the past that are going to help us in the future. What wisdom can we draw from past failures? And the reason why I'm asking this is the world is in fact getting more complex and more uncertain. It's not getting more linear and predictable. Some would say we're shifting to a knowledge economy, and it's not a time to be putting people like Pete and his peers aside simply because they've hit this magical age. Oh, okay, so you're old now, so okay, no, we put you aside. I'd say, it is their very knowledge and experience and life, their rich lives lived that we so desperately need as part of the mix when we think about solving some of our world's problems right now. All we need to do is shift the way we think about it. Von Bismarck quite easily, for political purposes, introduced retirement, and we adopted it. We can also disrupt that just as easily. Pete did. He did that by creating an alternative. He created an alternative where people could enjoy their retired life, the enjoyable aspects of retired life, and also work. Unfortunately, Pete passed away at the beginning of this year, so he can't work on that anymore, and he can't see that vision come to life, but I can. And I imagine an opportunity to facilitate the connection between mentors and people who want to continue contributing, and facilitating their connection with people who seek that kind of wisdom. So there's a business I'm starting up called Elderberry, which does that very thing, and it's actually focusing on business elders or elders who want to continue contributing and connecting them with female entrepreneurs. We've spoken today a lot about women and their power, and I believe it's women in business who can change this world. So I believe also when we can combine women with wisdom, that we will create businesses that will change this world. And earlier this year, I went to a conference which made a big impression on me, and I heard this one woman say something very profound. She said, the world needs all of us. And by that, she was really making the point that the world needs all of us, our whole selves, our whole being, not just our rational brains. It needs our hearts, and it needs our guts and our instincts. And I fully believe that. And I would say it needs all of us, people. Not just those who are allowed to participate because they're young. I believe if we can actually invite elders in, we can make such a big difference. So my invitation to you today is to find those elders around you and invite them in to share their unique experience, their wisdom, their knowledge, and work with them on your cause.